Corporal Elias Ward moved through the ash fields like a ghost who refused to die. Gray dust clung to his fatigues, coating him in the residue of a colony moon that had been alive just 2 days ago. Now the wind carried only the reek of burnt alloys and the fading static of orbital bombardment. His boots crunched over shattered hull plating as he scanned for any sign of survivors, human or otherwise. His unit had been scattered after the last strike, and his comms sputtered nothing but static. Ward was alone, low on supplies, and too stubborn to stop searching. A faint groan broke through the silence. Ward froze, pulse sharp. The sound came from a ridge of collapsed ferrocrete to his left. He tightened his grip on the medpack slung over his shoulder and approached slowly, stepping around jagged debris. When he reached the source, he saw a large armored figure half buried under a beam, its blackened plates cracked in several places. Strange silver blood pooled beneath him, glinting like molten metal in the dim light. The alien was tall, even wounded. He looked like a statue carved from obsidian and muscle. But what caught Ward's attention wasn't the size or the armor. It was the way the alien's fingers twitched weakly, as though still fighting even while unconscious. Ward knelt and brushed ash off the alien's visor, revealing a face beneath the cracked plate, angular, sharp-featured, and distinctly masculine. His breathing was shallow. Ward didn't recognize the species, but the vitals looked close enough to humanoid. He could work with that. "All right, big guy," Ward murmured. "Let's see if we can keep you from bleeding out." Protocol was clear. Unknown combatants were not to be assisted unless taken prisoner. But Ward had stopped caring about protocol somewhere between the first orbital strike and the last dying scream from the rubble. Hurt was hurt, and someone who could still groan was someone worth saving. He heaved the beam off the alien's torso with a grunt and flipped open his medkit. The armor resisted removal, its segmented plates clicking with unfamiliar mechanisms. Ward pried them loose anyway, determined fingers working past alien design and blood-slick edges. When he exposed the wound beneath, he sucked a breath. A deep gash carved across the alien's ribs, too close to vital organs. Ward cleaned it as best he could, using sterilizer foam and improvised sealant straps. The silver blood hissed faintly as it met the human antiseptic, but the bleeding slowed. A sudden hand shot out and clamped around Ward's wrist. Ward jerked back, but the grip held, weak yet unyielding. The alien's eyes snapped open, luminous and fierce, like twin shards of a dying star. He stared at Ward with confusion that quickly shifted into guarded hostility. Ward raised his free hand in surrender. "Easy. I'm patching you up. You are dying." The alien's grip loosened slightly. His voice emerged ragged, the words fractured but intelligible. "Human, why aid me? Because leaving you to bleed out seemed like a lousy way to spend my afternoon." The alien blinked, expression unreadable. His fingers finally released Ward's wrist. Ward resumed dressing the wound as if their brief conflict hadn't happened. "Name?" Ward asked. "Kel-Thyr," the alien rasped, wincing as Ward tightened a bandage. He stopped, gaze hardening. "Of the Veroln." Ward squinted. "Never heard of them." Kel-Thyr gave a faint, pained snort. "You would not." Ward couldn't tell if that was an insult or a statement of fact, but he let it slide. Instead, he focused on finishing the stabilizer wrap. The alien's muscles trembled under his touch, not from fear, Ward sensed, but from the strain of holding himself together. "You're lucky I found you," Ward said quietly. "Most of what's left out here isn't taking prisoners." Kel-Thyr's eyes flicked to the horizon. Distant booms echoed across the ash fields, and smoke curled upward in spirals. "Your war?" he asked. "Yours too, from the looks of it." Kel-Thyr's gaze sharpened, as though weighing the truth in Ward's tone. This moon was never meant to be touched by human boots. Ward shrugged. "Don't worry. We didn't exactly get a welcome mat." The alien's breathing steadied, though each inhale still shuddered. He struggled to sit up. Ward supported him, surprised by the sheer density of his frame. Even injured, Kel-Thyr felt like he was built from reinforced bone and coiled steel. A distant whir made Ward's head snap toward the sky. A swarm of reconnaissance drones drifted across the horizon, casting sweeping crimson beams across the ruins. Damn, Ward muttered. If they find us out here. Kale pushed himself to his feet with Ward's help. Even hunched and swaying, he towered over the human. Where do your kind hide? He asked. Ward hesitated. Normally, he wouldn't tell an unknown alien anything about human safe zones. But the drones were growing louder, their searchlights creeping closer. Leaving Kale would be a death sentence, for both of them if he got spotted. There's a collapsed bunker nearby, Ward said. If we move now, we can reach it before the sweep passes. Kale nodded once, a curt, almost regal gesture. Ward dismissed the thought. The alien was probably just trying to stay upright. He slung the alien's arm over his shoulder and started toward the broken ridge. Every step was a struggle. Kale weight made Ward's knees nearly buckle, but the alien leaned just enough to help. Their breaths synced. One human. One something far more powerful than Ward suspected. They reached the bunker entrance as the first drone beam grazed the ground behind them. Ward shoved Kale inside, ducked in after him, and pulled a chunk of metal over the opening. Darkness swallowed them. Only their breaths filled the quiet, slow and strained. Ward finally exhaled.
All right.
We wait here till the sweep moves east. Kale studied him through the dim light of flickering emergency strips, his expression unreadable. You risk much, the alien said softly. For someone you do not know. Ward leaned back against the wall, exhaustion settling into his bones. You were bleeding. That's all I needed to know. Kale tilted his head, as though trying to decipher a code. Strange. Humans, you surprise me. Ward smirked. We do that sometimes. Outside, the drones passed like hungry predators. Inside, two strangers, one human medic, one wounded alien of unknown rank, waited in the dark, bound now by necessity, suspicion, and a fragile thread of trust. Ward closed his eyes briefly, unaware that the man he'd just saved was far more than a soldier. Kale watched him in silence, unaware that fate had already begun reshaping the galaxy around them. The bunker was little more than a hollowed-out shell, a skeletal remnant of the colony's command center. Dust motes danced in the dim light cast by Ward's flickering medstrip, settling over debris like a thin layer of ash over a battlefield grave. Kale leaned against a crumbling wall, every breath a shudder, every movement careful. Ward tore strips of fabric from his own uniform to reinforce the alien's bandages, grimacing at the task. He had never treated someone this massive or this foreign, but the logic was the same. Stop the bleeding, stabilize the patient, keep him alive. You heal well, Kale said, voice low but edged with curiosity. Few would do this for an enemy. His gaze was fixed on Ward, piercing yet cautious. Ward shrugged, shifting a piece of jagged metal to support Kale's back. Enemy or not, bleeding in front of me doesn't earn anyone a free pass. Couldn't just leave you, Ward replied, hands deft even with the alien's unfamiliar anatomy. Guess we're partners now, whether you like it or not. Kale's lips twitched, possibly the faintest shadow of a smirk. Partners. Strange notion for humans. Ward didn't respond, preferring action to words. He retrieved a small med device from his pack, a compact synth band capable of monitoring vitals and stabilizing circulatory irregularities. Kale flinched as Ward secured it across his chest, the device's gentle hum unnervingly intimate. Outside, the ash fields were restless. Distant explosions punctuated the horizon, each one a stark reminder that the sweep had not yet ended. Ward peered through a cracked wall panel. If we stay here long, those drones will circle back. We need a plan or, at least somewhere to move next. Kale nodded slowly, testing the mobility of his limbs. We cross the Shard Ravine, he said.
Fast.
Avoid patrols. He gestured toward the horizon, where jagged crystal formations pierced the smoke-heavy sky. Difficult terrain, but safer. Ward's eyebrows rose. Crystalline mountains? Sounds like a death trap. Better than dying in place, Kale replied, voice firm. He tested his weight, the sheer mass of him making Ward grunt as he offered support. Ward realized then that the alien was far heavier than any human, yet every movement was precise, controlled even while weakened. The trek across the ravine of shards was treacherous. Angular crystal outcroppings sparkled with residual energy, creating electromagnetic interference that made Ward's med device hiss and whine. Each step required careful placement. A single miscalculation could trigger a cascade of falling shards. Kale leaned on Ward once, then again, the subtle shift of his weight enough to almost unbalance the human. Yet the alien's touch was not clumsy. It was measured, an unspoken acknowledgement of necessity. Why do you help me? Kale asked finally, voice barely above a whisper as they navigated a particularly narrow pass. Ward exhaled slowly. Because if someone's hurt, I patch them up. Doesn't matter if they're human or whatever you are. You need it. That's enough. Kale's eyes, bright even in the filtered light, lingered on Ward for a long moment. Humans rare among your kind. Compassion without gain. His voice faltered. I underestimated you. Ward smirked, but there was a tension behind his eyes. You're lucky I wasn't born a better shot, or this might have been your last day. Kale lips curled faintly. Lucky indeed. As they moved, Ward kept scanning the terrain. The ridge they intended to reach was fraught with automated sentries, tiny hovering drones with targeting optics that could incinerate a human in seconds. Ward had little more than his instincts, combined with Kale's unexpected awareness of the drone's energy signature. Stay close and follow my lead, Ward instructed. I'll guide us through the blind spots. Kale tilted his head. I follow your guidance? You follow my instructions. That's the same thing, Ward said, keeping his tone light, though his senses were stretched taut. The alien gave a sharp nod, and together they moved with deliberate caution. When the drones swept too close, Kale's faint pulse of kinetic energy flared, not enough to destroy, but sufficient to disrupt sensors. Ward ducked instinctively, impressed despite himself. You're stronger than I thought, Ward muttered, not meeting Kale's gaze. Kale's chest rose and fell rapidly. You have not yet seen. His words carried weight, and for a brief moment, Ward sensed a depth of power that went far beyond the raw physicality in front of him. Night fell over the ravine, cloaking the landscape in darkness. They found shelter beneath a massive shard leaning precariously against the jagged wall of the ravine. Ward worked again to patch the alien's wounds, improvising with bandages and wiring stripped from ruined machinery. Kale watched silently, letting him work, though every so often a subtle pulse of energy betrayed his latent strength. You ask too many questions, Kale said finally, voice low, almost a growl. Ward grinned. That's my job. You heal, I interrogate. Keeps me sane. Kale's eyes softened. I wish I could reveal more. But if they knew, they would expect obedience or worse. His fingers flexed involuntarily, as if resisting the urge to demonstrate power. You see only a fraction of what I am. Yet you treat me as a person. Ward paused, cleaning the last of the wound and tightening a bandage. Guess that's just how I operate. You could be a god, for all I know. You bleed, I patch. End of story. The alien's expression flickered, surprise, something like amusement, perhaps even admiration. Ward didn't look up, but he felt the weight of that gaze as if it pressed against his shoulder. For the first time, Kale seemed uncertain of his usual dominance, constrained not by human might, but by human choice. A faint, mechanical hum rose from the valley below. Ward's instinct screamed caution. Drone patrols coming back. We move at first light, he said. No heroics tonight. Kale nodded. I will obey your guidance. For now. They settled in as the artificial winds carried the metallic tang of blood and ash, sharing silence more comfortable than words. The bond between them, tentative and fragile, had been forged in necessity and vulnerability. Ward had saved a life. Kelthyr had survived, and neither would be the same. Outside, distant explosions punctuated the night sky, announcing that the world beyond the ravine had not paused. Within, two strangers, one human, one alien of unmatched strength, waited, bound together by circumstance, trust, and the quiet understanding that what came next would test them both. And neither could yet know how far their journey would take them, or how deadly it would become. The first light of the distant sun struck the jagged spires of the Shard ravine like molten silver, revealing the full scale of the destruction around them. Ward and Kelthyr moved cautiously, each step calculated, each glance scanning the horizon. Ward could feel it before he saw it, a ripple in the atmosphere, subtle but unmistakable. A massive shadow passed overhead, and the ground vibrated beneath their feet. The Black Sun Guard had arrived. Kelthyr froze mid-step, every muscle tensing. Ward noticed the change immediately, the aura of authority shifting around the alien, as if the air itself acknowledged his presence. Ward had been cautious before, but now even he felt the gravity of the situation. The dropships glided down with ceremonial precision, their obsidian hulls reflecting the rising sun. 6 warriors emerged from each craft, their armor luminous with patterns that shimmered like liquid light. They knelt as one before Kelthyr, the perfect synchronization of discipline and devotion. Imperial Heir Kelthyr, Sovereign Ascendant, the lead guard intoned, the words heavy with reverence. Ward blinked. He had assumed Kelthyr was a soldier, maybe an elite warrior. He had no idea he had been treating the galaxy's most powerful warrior as a wounded recruit. Kelthyr's gaze flicked briefly to Ward, a subtle question in his eyes. Ward's stomach twisted with equal parts awe and apprehension. The human's role in this moment felt dangerously small, too small, but also significant. He had saved the most formidable figure in the Empire, without knowing it. The lead guard stepped forward, his voice lower, commanding, "This human, he has interfered with battle zones. Protocol dictates removal." Ward instinctively bristled. "Hey, I didn't interfere. I patched him up, that's all." Kelthy's eyes narrowed. There was no trace of the wounded, uncertain man Ward had known. Now the sovereign ascendant of the Veryln radiated power, so palpable it was almost painful to witness. He moved forward, taller, more imposing than ever, his presence alone forcing the guard to hesitate. "This human is under my protection," Kelthyr declared. His voice carried across the ash fields like a weapon. "None shall harm him." The guard stiffened. These were men trained to obey the mightiest of beings without question, yet Kelthyr had broken protocol with a single sentence. Ward's heart pounded. He had never wanted politics, never asked to be part of alien hierarchies. Now he realized neutrality was no longer an option. Kelthyr gestured toward the horizon, toward the remnants of the battlefield they had crossed. "The war continues beyond this field. The fleet approaches, seeking to end me. We move to the command skiff. This human accompanies me." Ward swallowed hard. The command skiff, a massive, streamlined vessel designed for rapid deployment and leadership over thousands of troops, loomed on the ridge. He could feel the weight of the eyes on him, the suspicion of an entire guard whose loyalty was absolute. But Kelthyr's stance left no room for argument. Inside the skiff, Ward was overwhelmed. Holographic maps shimmered around them, displaying the galaxy in sharp relief. Imperial territories, enemy fleets, strategic points of interest. The scale was dizzying. He had patched a man on the ground. Now he was standing inside the nerve center of an empire. Kelthyr moved to a central console, his fingers tracing energy patterns that suggested a lifetime of mastery. Ward felt almost intrusive in the quiet awe that surrounded him. "You lead this?" Ward asked, voice low. Kelthyr glanced at him, expression neutral but eyes burning. "I am responsible for the lives of billions. Leadership is burden enough, but isolation is worse." I came to the battlefield alone, to test prophecy. His words were deliberate, careful. Ward did not fully understand, but he felt the weight of the confession. Kale Thyr had deliberately sought danger, deliberately exposed himself to mortality. Ward's instinctual sense of right and wrong kicked in. "You don't have to do it alone," he said quietly. "Even legends, real or imagined, need someone at their side. Doesn't have to be just you." Kale Thyr's eyes lingered on him, a fleeting trace of admiration softening the harsh lines of command. "Perhaps you are correct." A sharp chime interrupted the moment. Ward and Kale Thyr both turned toward the readout. A hostile fleet had dropped out of warp near a neighboring system. Enemy dreadnoughts, strike cruisers, and assault frigates, all targeting Kale Thyr directly. The prophecy he had sought to test was not idle myth. Forces beyond imagination hunted him. Ward's pulse quickened. "Looks like they're not just after you. They're looking for me too, by proximity." Kale Thyr's gaze hardened.
"No."
"They seek to end me before I can return to claim my position fully." His voice was ice and fire, calm but lethal. "And yet, you will remain at my side. You must." Ward swallowed, realizing that his decision to help had created a responsibility he could not escape. But alongside fear, a spark of something else ignited: excitement, courage, and the awareness that he had been trusted in ways humans rarely experienced. The Imperial Guard moved into position, forming defensive arrays around the skiff. Kale Thyr activated the ship's sublight thrusters, rising above the ridge with a grace that betrayed the raw power he wielded. Ward clung to a rail, scanning the enemy formation. He saw a pattern, a weakness in their flank that a conventional assault would overlook. The Guard prepared for an all-out fight, expecting Kale Thyr alone to crush them. But Ward's human intuition, grounded in guerrilla warfare and battlefield improvisation, offered a different solution, one that required his participation. Kale Thyr noticed his hesitation and nodded subtly. "You will speak. I will listen." Ward drew a deep breath. There's a blind spot in their formation behind the command carrier. A surgical strike could neutralize the fleet without a head-on fight. The guards tensed, murmuring disapproval. But Kale Thyr considered the human's advice. Then, with deliberate authority, he spoke. "We follow this plan." His words carried both command and validation, and Ward realized he was no longer just a medic. He was a participant in shaping the tide of an interstellar war. Outside, the enemy fleet advanced, unaware that its target had allies it had never considered, an unassuming human whose courage and reasoning might prove decisive, and a sovereign whose power was absolute. Inside the skiff, two men, one human, one alien of unimaginable might, prepared to face a storm together, bound by trust, necessity, and the fragile thread of an alliance that could change the galaxy. And for the first time, Ward understood. The battlefield was not merely a place of death. It was where destinies were forged, and he had already been given a role he could not refuse. The void outside the command skiff shimmered with the arrival of the hostile fleet, dreadnoughts and frigates stretching across the horizon like a blackened wall. Their weapon systems glowed with lethal intent, each pulse of energy a promise of destruction. Kale Thyr's armor gleamed under the ship's interior lights, every line and plate a testament to the warrior he was and the burden he bore. Ward watched him, heart hammering. The man he had patched up in the ash fields now stood like a god preparing for battle, yet he did not move with arrogance. He moved with calculated authority, tempered by centuries of expectation and endless responsibility. "They intend to finish this before we can return to my home system," Kale Thyr said, voice steady but cold. His eyes scanned the holographic display of the approaching fleet. "We cannot allow them to succeed." Ward leaned over the tactical panel, tracing the enemy's formation with careful fingers. His human mind instinctively sought patterns, weaknesses, flaws that brute strength alone might not exploit. "There's a gap in their defensive perimeter," he said. "The command carrier relies on frontal coverage. Their aft sector is vulnerable. A precise strike could disrupt their fleet cohesion." Kiltichwayar's gaze lingered on him. The sovereign ascendant, feared across systems, now considered a human's insight. You propose strategy, human. Your mind sees, as well as your hands heal. Ward shrugged, uneasy under the weight of that acknowledgement. I've patched more than a few wounded soldiers in my time. Fighting isn't so different from healing. Anticipate where the damage will hit next, act before it spreads. Kiltichwayar's expression softened imperceptibly. Perhaps your kind has more merit than I credited. The Black Sun Guard moved into position around the skiff, defensive arrays shimmering with energy. Kiltichwayar's hands hovered over the controls, tapping into latent abilities that humans could scarcely comprehend. The ship itself seemed to respond, bending gravity subtly, shifting mass to accommodate his will. Ward felt a pulse of kinetic energy radiate through the deck, a sensation at once beautiful and terrifying. Ready? Kiltichwayar asked. Ward nodded, swallowing the tension in his throat. Let's do this. The skiff accelerated, slicing through space with lethal precision. Kiltichwayar manipulated gravity fields to distort sensors and trajectory, creating blind spots where the human-led strike team could maneuver. Ward coordinated the timing of their attack, issuing commands to the guard and marking targets for precise engagement. It was a dance of two minds, human intuition and alien mastery, melding in a way that neither had anticipated. When the first salvo hit the command carrier's blind spot, Kiltichwayar unleashed a controlled pulse of energy. The impact reverberated through the enemy formation, disabling shielding and crippling engines. Ward's heart leapt. The strategy worked. Ships scattered, their formation collapsing into chaos. Kiltichwayar's eyes gleamed with restrained satisfaction, yet his attention never wavered from Ward. You guided this, he said quietly. Your mind has value beyond healing. You aren't necessary. Ward felt an unfamiliar surge of pride, tempered by disbelief. He had patched a stranger's wounds, and now he had played a pivotal role in shaping the outcome of a galactic confrontation. I'm just a human, he said, almost reflexively. I do what I can. Kiltichwayar studied him, the weight of his gaze heavy with acknowledgement and something more, respect, perhaps even trust. Human, you do more than survive. You adapt. You act. That is rare. Outside, the remaining fleet fled in disarray, leaving scorched voids where dreadnoughts and frigates had been moments before. The skiff hovered in the aftermath, silent except for the hum of its internal systems. Ward sank to a console, breathing hard, still trying to process the enormity of what had just transpired. Kiltichwayar approached, towering even in the confines of the skiff. He placed a hand on Ward's shoulder, a simple gesture, yet it carried weight. You saved more than my life today. You preserved potential. A human has changed the course of imperial destiny. Ward shook his head, managing a tired grin. I didn't do it for glory. I just patched a guy who was bleeding. Kiltichwayar's lips twitched, almost a smile. And yet, that simple act has created ripples across galaxies. Your compassion is a weapon I cannot wield. But you, human, you embody it freely. Ward's gaze shifted to the displays, showing the retreating fleet. So, what happens now? Kiltichwayar's voice was measured, commanding. Now, we return. You will remain by my side, not as a soldier, not as a subordinate, but as an advisor, a mind unclouded by tradition, capable of seeing what others cannot. Your kind has a gift. I intend to use it wisely. Ward blinked, overwhelmed. He had expected nothing more than survival, yet here he was, entrusted with influence over strategies that could affect countless lives. The weight of it pressed against him, but it was tempered by an unexpected sense of purpose. Kiltichwayar looked outward through the skiff's viewport, eyes reflecting the stars beyond, unyielding yet calm. Human, you dressed my wounds. Now, stay and help me heal the galaxy. Ward's chest tightened. The words resonated more than any medal or accolade ever could. He had started as a medic patching a stranger. He now stood beside a sovereign, an architect of destinies, and a warrior unmatched in power. In that moment, fear and awe intertwined, giving way to resolve. "I'll stay," Ward said finally, voice steady, echoing the quiet determination that had guided him through ash fields, shattered bunkers, and deadly ravines. "If you're healing the galaxy, I'm not walking away." Kale Tichwayar's hand remained on his shoulder, a rare gesture of solidarity. The skiff's engines hummed beneath them, ready to carry them home or into further conflict. Outside, the void of space stretched endlessly, silent yet full of possibilities. Together, human and sovereign, healer and warrior, they would face the storms ahead, not as savior and subject, but as allies bound by trust, courage, and the understanding that even the smallest act of kindness could ripple across the universe. And as the stars streaked past the viewport, carrying them toward both danger and destiny, Ward realized that survival was no longer the goal. Change was. And he was no longer a bystander in the galaxy's unfolding tale.